A red carpet for Putin in America while Trump slaps Switzerland with a 39% gold tariff and reopens the race for Greenland's critical minerals. Is this diplomacy or a dangerous gamble with global power? A red carpet rolled out in America for a man accused of war crimes. US President Donald Trump applauded his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, as the two leaders greeted one another like longtime allies. The spectacle was striking. Two world powers shaking hands before the cameras, projecting unity even as tensions remained unresolved. Despite high expectations, the summit did not deliver the ceasefire agreement or even the framework of a deal that many observers, including President Trump himself, had anticipated in recent weeks. Trump's tariff disputes with Canada, the European Union, and more than 60 nations dominated headlines. Yet, for a brief moment, all eyes turned to Anchorage. The summit between Trump and Putin had been billed as a pivotal global event. During his short press conference, President Putin highlighted U.S. Russian history, evoking the bonds of World War II. For Moscow, the meeting was an opportunity to remind the world of shared victories. For Trump, it was a stage to portray himself as the leader who could secure peace in Ukraine. But beyond the symbolism, the summit revealed a sharp divide between appearance and outcome. While Trump may not have appeared to lose outright, many analysts argued that Putin emerged as the clear winner. Trump sought a ceasefire yet left with little more than vague promises. Putin, meanwhile, gained precisely what he wanted: international visibility, state media triumphs back home, and the prestige of standing shoulder to shoulder with the US president. Without making concessions, Putin returned to Moscow stronger in perception, while Trump departed Anchorage with only the suggestion of future meetings and the possibility of freezing conflict lines in exchange for Ukrainian territorial concessions. Observers noted that this outcome gave Putin space to continue the war effort while avoiding fresh penalties. US media outlets, meanwhile, focused less on policy and more on optics. Trump's tired appearance, his lack of clarity, and his choice to call the relationship fantastic rather than setting firm boundaries. Critics argue that this allowed Putin to walk away as the clear victor. For many, the memory of an earlier humiliating scene when President Volodymyr Zelensky appeared cornered during an Oval Office meeting with Trump was still fresh. Determined to Zelensky did not come alone. Backed by the NATO Secretary General, the President of the European Commission, and the leaders of the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Italy, and Finland, Ukraine's leader became the centerpiece of a united transatlantic front. Their joint mission was clear: demand firm, credible security guarantees for Ukraine, modeled on NATO's Article 5, and reject any plan that forced Kyiv to surrender territory. The European Commission president stressed that borders cannot be altered by force, and that Ukraine must remain capable of defending itself by arriving together. These leaders transformed Zelensky's appearance from an isolated visit into a powerful demonstration of solidarity. In a strong statement, Prime Minister Mark Carney praised what he described as Washington's openness to providing Ukraine with long-term security guarantees. His words were clear, robust, and credible. Guarantees are essential to any just and lasting peace between Russia and Ukraine. Canada added its voice through Prime Minister Mark Carney, who cautiously welcomed signs that the United States might be more open to providing security guarantees for Ukraine. Carney emphasized that such guarantees are essential for any just and lasting peace. His tone was deliberate. He avoided direct clashes with President Trump and refrained from overselling the outcome. But his words echoed Canada's long-standing view: peace cannot rest on unstable or temporary deals. While Ukraine and European leaders pressed for stronger commitments, Carney framed his remarks as a reminder that credible guarantees must remain at the center of any eventual settlement. Meanwhile, Trump himself struck a very different tone, saying, "I've always had a fantastic relationship with President Putin, with Vladimir. Thank you. Thank you." The Alaska Summit once again illustrated how political theater can overshadow the brutal realities of war. Putin walked away with powerful images and no new sanctions. Trump left without the breakthrough he sought. Europe closed ranks behind President Zelensky, while Canada highlighted the importance of reliable guarantees over rushed bargains. The parallel is clear. Trump's tariff battles with Canada, the EU, and more than 60 other countries had already shown how quick fixes in trade can leave lasting damage. Anchorage now underscores the same challenge in security. The real test ahead is whether President Trump can move beyond short-term tactics to secure peace without sacrificing Ukraine's sovereignty or the trust of America's allies. The president is escalating his global tariff campaign once again. Switzerland was hit with a stunning 39% tariff, one of the highest yet. Trump also warned that the European Union could face a 35% tariff unless it committed to $600 billion in U.S. investments. Even before his sweeping new duties on more than 60 countries took effect on August 7th, Trump had already turned up the pressure on two of America's oldest European partners, Switzerland and the U. In the first week of August, the Swiss government faced intense strain. Threatened with a 39% tariff, the Swiss president flew to Washington remarkably. Without even a formal White House invitation, Byrne offered new trade proposals, including increased U.S. LNG purchases, expanded imports of American pharmaceuticals, and adjustments to a defense order for Lockheed Martin fighter jets. Yet, there was one line Switzerland would not cross: opening its highly protected agricultural sector. Without that concession, the talks went nowhere. The Swiss delegation left Washington empty-handed, and the 39% tariff remained in place. For a nation whose exports to the U.S. include high-value goods like luxury watches, chocolate, and skincare products, the economic impact is real. The Swiss case became a cautionary tale almost overnight. Under Trump's current strategy, only visible, tangible concessions appear to secure tariff relief. And Switzerland is not alone. From Japan to South Korea, and now the EU, the White House has adopted the same approach, ratcheting tariffs higher, then waiting to see which concessions foreign governments will make. In contrast to Switzerland, the European Union managed to negotiate a framework that capped its tariff ceiling at 15%. But the deal came with a catch: it lacked detailed commitments. Almost immediately, President Trump linked the framework to a sweeping demand: $600 billion in investment into the United States. To patterns quickly emerged. The EU secured a lower ceiling, but stayed under constant threat of higher rates if it failed to meet U.S. expectations. Switzerland, by offering fewer concessions, ended up saddled with one of the steepest tariffs on record. Together, these examples sketched out the outer boundaries for countries still in negotiations, including Canada. When asked about the timing of the next Trump-Carney discussion, Canadian officials responded with measured language. The message was clear. Canada's options mirror those of Europe and Switzerland. Either agree to significant concessions in exchange for a lower ceiling, or hold firm and risk the current punitive rate. Prime Minister Mark Carney is choosing strategic patience. He is quietly diversifying Canada's exports to markets like the EU and UK, both of which have already recorded double-digit growth this year, while keeping communication channels with Washington open. And Canada has leverage from critical minerals and energy supplies to its role in North America's auto supply chains. Canada holds advantages the United States cannot easily replace. Ontario Premier Doug Ford underscored the point, warning that these tariffs ultimately punish American consumers and workers as much as Canadian industries. Trump's tariff playbook has revealed itself as a flexible, unpredictable bargaining tool. The Swiss case showed what happens when a country arrives without offering something Washington values. You leave with the same high tariff you came in with. The EU case showed that even a signed framework offers no guarantee of stability. For Canada, the lesson is simple but critical: combine resolve with real leverage. That means being prepared to walk away from a bad deal, while also putting forward proposals that align with U.S. economic interests, without sacrificing core national advantages. In this contest, Canada is not a subordinate player. It is a vital ally with bargaining chips Trump cannot ignore. The outcome will depend on how effectively Ottawa plays its cards in the weeks ahead. The stakes grew even higher when Switzerland's president returned from Washington empty-handed. Days later, the Financial Times reported that the U.S. had imposed a 39% tariff on imported gold bars, dealing a direct blow to Switzerland, the world's largest gold refining hub. This wasn't simply a hit on one country's exports. It was a message: no commodity, however entrenched in global trade, is beyond the reach of Trump's tariff strategy. Gold shipments froze overnight. U.S. gold prices spiked above European levels, creating an arbitrage gap. Traders were caught off guard until early August. Bullion had been assumed safe. But when a Swiss refiner received a formal U.S. customs letter citing tariff code 710,813,550, the message was official. Even the standard 1 kilogram bars would face the full 39% duty. The result was a sudden rupture in supply chains. U.S. imports of gold had surged earlier in the year, 43 metric tons in January alone, nearly double the country's monthly refining output, as buyers rushed to front-load shipments. Now, those stockpiles are the only bridge across the supply gap. For Canada, the lesson is straightforward. Gold may not be a major export north of the border, but the precedent matters. If gold can be targeted, so can Canadian strategic minerals, energy, products, or even high-end manufacturing. For Canada, the U.S. gold tariff was more than a dispute with Switzerland. It was a warning shot. Ottawa has responded with a dual strategy: public resistance paired with quiet diplomacy. The signal is clear: Canada will not be outmaneuvered. The contest is no longer about who can raise tariffs higher. It is about who can adapt faster to the shocks still to come. Donald Trump's second term has revived a fixation dating back to 2019 Greenland. But this time, it isn't just a headline-grabbing remark. It's a sustained strategy to secure control over one of the world's richest untapped sources of critical minerals. For Washington, Greenland's reserves are not only an economic opportunity, they are a national security priority. Trump has placed the island at the center of his administration's global resource agenda. The island is home to vast deposits of rare earth elements, molybdenum, and other critical resources valued in the billions. These materials are essential for everything from fighter jets to wind turbines. In June 2025, Greenland approved a 30-year permit for an EU-backed project to mine molybdenum, a key ingredient in advanced steel for aerospace, defense, and clean energy. But the supply chain remains fragile. According to the U.S. Geological Survey, China produced 40% of the world's molybdenum in 2024 and still controls up to 97% of rare earth refining. When Beijing cut exports earlier this year in retaliation for U.S. tariffs, the impact was immediate. Ford Motor Company halted production at plants in Chicago and Louisville within weeks. For Trump, Greenland offers one of the few viable routes to reduce U.S. dependence on China. His tactics mix public bravado insisting that America must have Greenland, with quiet deal-making behind closed doors. Australian firm Energy Transition Minerals has already invested more than $150 million in mapping the Tambre's rare earth deposit, one of the world's largest. But challenges remain. No deep water ports, no roads, Arctic weather that can ground flights for days, and ore types never before processed at commercial scale. Even so, investor interest is strong. For Trump's allies, the potential payoff secure. Supply chains for the West justifies the persistence. Greenland's defiance mirrors Canada's recent experience. Trump once joked about making Canada the 51st state, a remark that was dismissed as rhetoric, but reflected his style of mixing trade pressure with political theater. In 2025, the U.S. raised tariffs on Canadian non-USMCA goods from 25% to 35%, targeting sectors from lumber to machinery. Prime Minister Mark Carney resisted rushing into concessions, coordinating closely with provincial leaders like Doug Ford to maintain a united front. This strategy aligns Canada with other players navigating U.S. pressure. The EU, through long-term contracts, has secured access to Greenland's non-Chinese minerals. Canadian firms such as Greenland Resources' Malmbjerg project are part of this same supply chain shift. By coordinating investments and policy, Canada, the EU, and Greenland are building resilience, reducing dependence on both US and Chinese market swings. For Ottawa, it's about sovereignty and stability. For Greenland, it's development without dependence on a single power. For Brussels, it's a hedge against geopolitical risk. From Trump's perspective, however, Greenland is not optional, it is essential. Its mineral wealth could loosen China's grip on critical supply chains, while its location just 1,200 miles from the U.S. East Coast makes it a strategic outpost between North America, Russia, and China. But securing Greenland will not be simple. Canada is leveraging alliances and its own resources. The EU is embedding Greenland into its strategic materials plan, and Greenland's leaders are weighing outside offers against environmental standards and their own autonomy. The contest over Greenland's resources is part of a broader realignment across the Arctic and North Atlantic. Whether Trump's mix of pressure and negotiation brings Greenland closer to Washington or pushes it toward a multilateral coalition remains uncertain. What is clear is this: the race for Arctic resources is no longer theoretical. Deals are being signed, alliances are forming, and decisions made in Nuuk, Ottawa, Brussels, and Washington will shape not only the region's future, but the global balance of power in critical minerals for decades to come.